The day Kate showed up unannounced was the day my life began unraveling. It was a warm June morning, the kind of day when the air feels heavy with possibilities. I had just finished cleaning the living room when I heard the familiar rumble of a suitcase rolling across the cobblestones. At first, I thought it was a delivery driver. But then I caught a glimpse of blonde hair and a tailored red blazer through the window. My sister. Kate. Surprise! She called out, her voice as bright as the sunlight streaming in behind her. I opened the door hesitantly, my heart sinking even as I forced a smile. Kate? What are you doing here? She flung her arms around me, pulling me into a hug that smelled like expensive perfume and ambition. Oh, Lila, do I need a reason to visit my favorite sister? Her suitcase clattered behind her as she breezed past me into the house, already making herself at home. Kate had always had a knack for arriving without notice and turning my world upside down. She was a force of nature, magnetic and reckless, with an effortless charm that drew people in and left them dazzled or destroyed. I tried to keep the unease out of my voice as I asked, "How long are you staying?" "Not long," she replied vaguely, waving a manicured hand. "Just until I figure out my next move." That answer should have been my first clue. Kate didn't do figuring out. She thrived on chaos, living in a whirlwind of exotic vacations, high-profile flings, and impulsive decisions that always seemed to work out in her favor. Meanwhile, I had built a life of routines, a quiet suburban existence with Ryan, my husband of 8 years. Safe, stable. Until now. Ryan came home that evening to find Kate sprawled on the couch, a glass of wine in hand. She was in full storyteller mode, regaling me with tales of her recent escapades in Paris and Rome. "Kate," he exclaimed, his face lighting up as he walked through the door. "This is a surprise." She hopped up and threw her arms around him, the gesture a little too familiar for my liking. "Ryan, it's been forever." I stood awkwardly in the doorway watching as my husband, my steady, reliable Ryan, grinned like a schoolboy. His eyes lingered on her for a moment too long, and a knot tightened in my chest. That evening at dinner, the dynamic shifted. Kate dominated the conversation, her laughter filling the room as she poked fun at Ryan's predictable routines. "Still waking up at 6 every morning for your jog?" she teased, her eyes sparkling. "Every day," he replied with a grin. "Discipline is key." "Oh, Ryan," she said, leaning closer. "You're too serious. You should let loose once in a while." I forced a laugh, trying to brush off the pang of jealousy that flickered through me. This was Kate being Kate, charming, magnetic, and completely unaware of the havoc she wreaked. But as the days turned into weeks, her presence began to feel less like a visit and more like an invasion. Kate had a way of inserting herself into every aspect of our lives. She started joining Ryan on his morning runs, something I'd never had the stamina or interest to do. She'd come back flushed and laughing, her arm brushing his as they recounted some joke I wasn't privy to. At night, she'd linger in the living room after dinner, challenging Ryan to card games and coaxing out the side of him that I hadn't seen in years, the carefree, boyish Ryan who laughed until his sides hurt. "Come on, Ree," she'd say, using the nickname that had once been mine alone. "One more round. Don't tell me you're tired." And he never was. Not for her. I tried to convince myself it was all harmless. But then there were the little things. The way her hand would rest on his shoulder for just a second too long, or how she'd share inside jokes with him, leaving me feeling like an outsider in my own home. One night, as I lay awake in bed, I heard them laughing downstairs. It was a low, intimate laugh, the kind I hadn't heard from Ryan in years. My chest tightened and I clenched the sheets in my fists. What were they laughing about? What could possibly be so funny at midnight, when I was upstairs alone? I started noticing the subtle changes in Ryan. He seemed lighter, more energetic, as if Kate had breathed new life into him. He came home earlier from work, his excuses vague. "Thought I'd beat the traffic," he'd say with a grin. But I knew better. He wanted to see her. One afternoon, I came home early from running errands to find them in the kitchen. Kate was leaning over Ryan's shoulder as he chopped vegetables, her hair falling in waves around her face. She was laughing at something he'd said, her hand resting lightly on his back. "Am I interrupting something?" I asked, my voice sharper than I intended. They both froze, turning to look at me. "Of course not," Kate said breezily, straightening up. "Just helping Ryan with dinner." Ryan avoided my gaze, focusing intently on the cutting board. As Kate's day stretched into its second month, the tension in the house became unbearable. I tried to talk to Ryan about it one night as we lay in bed. "Don't you think it's time Kate found her own place?" I asked carefully. He sighed, staring at the ceiling. "She's your sister, Lila. She's family." "I know," I said, my voice trembling. "But it feels like she's taking over." Ryan turned to me, his expression unreadable. "She's going through something. Don't be so hard on her." I wanted to scream. Why was he defending her? Why couldn't he see what I was seeing? But I swallowed my frustration, too afraid of what his answer might reveal. One night I couldn't take it anymore. I confronted Kate in the guest room, my voice shaking with a mix of anger and desperation. "What are you doing?" I demanded. "You've been here for months. Don't you think it's time you moved on?" She looked up from her laptop, her expression calm but her eyes cold. "Why are you so worked up, Lila?" "Jealous." The word hit me like a slap. "This isn't about jealousy," I said, my voice rising. "It's about respect. You've crossed the line." Kate smirked, a knowing look in her eyes. "If you think there's something going on, maybe you should take a closer look at your marriage." Her words cut deeper than I cared to admit. The final straw came on a rainy Saturday evening. I was folding laundry in the bedroom when I heard them downstairs, their voices hushed. Curious, I crept to the top of the stairs, straining to hear. "I just don't want to hurt her," Ryan was saying, his voice heavy with guilt. "She doesn't have to know," Kate replied, her tone soft but insistent. "It'll be our little secret." My heart stopped. I wanted to believe I had misunderstood, that their words meant something innocent. But deep down I knew better. They had crossed the line, and now there was no going back. The night I caught them felt like stepping into a waking nightmare. It started with little things. Kate's laughter drifting up from the living room, low and intimate, mingling with Ryan's voice. I had been lying in bed, staring at the ceiling, replaying their whispers from earlier. "Escape. Trapped." The words rang in my ears like a taunt, daring me to confront what I already knew but couldn't yet admit. When I heard the clinking of glasses downstairs, I couldn't take it anymore. Throwing off the covers, I slipped out of bed and crept toward the staircase, the soft glow of the fireplace guiding my way. My heart pounded as I peered down, catching sight of them on the couch. Ryan sat with his elbows on his knees, his head hanging low. Kate was next to him, her body angled toward his, her hand resting on his thigh. A touch too familiar, too intimate. My breath caught as I saw her lean closer, her voice soft but urgent. "You're miserable with her, Ryan," she said, her fingers tightening on his leg. "You don't have to pretend anymore. You deserve more than this. More than her." Ryan groaned, running a hand through his hair. "It's not that simple, Kate. She's my wife." "Wife in name only," Kate shot back, her voice hardening. "When was the last time she made you feel alive? When was the last time you laughed like you do with me?" I gripped the banister, my nails digging into the wood. My blood boiled at her words, at the way she dismissed me as though I were some forgotten piece of furniture. But what made my stomach churn was Ryan's silence. He didn't deny her. He didn't defend me. Instead, he looked at her with an expression I hadn't seen in years, raw, vulnerable, and something else that made my heart shatter: desire. The next morning, I felt like a ghost haunting my own home. Ryan barely looked at me as he left for work, mumbling something about a meeting. Kate, as always, floated through the kitchen like she owned it, her silky robe swaying as she poured herself coffee. "Morning," she chirped, her smile as bright and fake as the sun streaming through the windows. I didn't respond, too consumed by the memory of her hand on Ryan's thigh, her words echoing in my mind. But I wasn't ready to confront her, not yet. I needed proof, something concrete to strip away her lies and Ryan's excuses. When Kate left later that afternoon to grab lunch with a friend, she left her phone charging on the counter. My hands trembled as I picked it up, the temptation too strong to resist. Unlocking it was easy. Kate had always been careless with security. The messages were a damning trail. Flirty texts between her and Ryan filled the screen, laced with inside jokes and plans to meet when I wasn't around. My breath caught at one particular exchange from the night before. "Kate, do you regret it?" "Ryan, but I feel awful for her." "Kate, she doesn't have to know." We'll figure this out. My vision blurred with tears as I set the phone down, my body trembling with rage and heartbreak. They had already crossed the line. I wasn't paranoid. I wasn't imagining things. They had betrayed me in the most intimate way. That evening I pretended everything was normal. I cooked dinner, laughed at Ryan's tired jokes, and even asked Kate about her imaginary lunch. But inside a storm brewed. I wasn't sure how to confront them or when. All I knew was that I wouldn't let this go unanswered. As the night wore on, I noticed them exchanging glances, furtive, guilty, and electric with a tension that made my skin crawl. Kate excused herself early, retreating to the guest room. Ryan lingered, fidgeting with his phone. I think I'll stay up and read for a bit, he said, avoiding my eyes. I nodded, forcing a tight smile. I'm heading to bed. Good night. I didn't go to bed. Instead, I waited, standing in the shadows of the hallway until I heard the faint creak of his footsteps heading toward the guest room. When I pushed open the door, they were standing close, too close. Kate's hand was on Ryan's chest, her face tilted up toward his. The air between them crackled with unspoken words, a magnetic pull that made my stomach churn. They froze when they saw me, their expressions morphing into masks of guilt and panic. Well, I said, my voice shaking with fury, don't let me interrupt. Ryan stepped back, his face pale. Lila, I can explain. Explain what? I snapped, my voice rising. Explain why my husband is sneaking into my sister's room in the middle of the night? Or why the two of you have been whispering behind my back for weeks? Lila, it's not what you think, Kate interjected, her voice syrupy and insincere. Ryan and I were just talking. Talking? I laughed bitterly, shaking my head. Do you think I'm stupid? I've seen the texts, Kate. I know everything. Kate's face hardened, her mask of charm slipping. You don't know anything, she said coldly. You've been so busy feeling sorry for yourself, you didn't notice that your marriage was falling apart. Enough. I roared, my voice echoing through the room. I turned to Ryan, my hands clenched into fists. You. Look me in the eye and tell me you haven't touched her. Ryan's silence was deafening. He couldn't meet my gaze, his jaw tightening as he looked at the floor. The truth hung in the air between us, heavy and suffocating. You coward. I spat, my voice breaking. You let her into our home, into our lives, and you didn't even have the decency to tell me when it stopped being innocent. Lila, Ryan started, but I held up a hand to silence him. Don't. Just don't. I turned to Kate, my anger flaring into something volcanic. And you. You're my sister. How could you? Kate smirked, her defiance cutting through me like a blade. Maybe if you paid more attention to your husband, he wouldn't have needed me. The words hit me like a slap. Without thinking, I lunged at her, my hand connecting with her cheek in a sharp crack that left my palm stinging. Kate stumbled back, her eyes wide with shock. Get out. I hissed, my voice low and trembling with rage. Both of you. Get the hell out of my house. Ryan hesitated, his face a mask of anguish. Lila, please. I said get out. I screamed, tears streaming down my face. You've made your choice. Now live with it. As they packed their things in stunned silence, I stood in the hallway, watching them with a mixture of heartbreak and fury. The man I thought I knew, the sister I thought I loved, they had destroyed everything. And now they were leaving together. The day after they left felt like stepping into the aftermath of a storm. The house was eerily quiet, the air thick with the weight of their absence. Their voices no longer echoed in the hallways. The living room where they had laughed and whispered was still and empty. Yet the silence offered no comfort. Instead, it felt like the house itself was holding its breath, waiting for me to collapse under the weight of what had happened. I didn't cry, not at first. Instead, I moved like a machine, erasing every trace of them. I stripped the guest bed where Kate had slept and threw the sheets into the washer with a violent shove. I gathered her forgotten earrings and scattered makeup, tossing them into a box to be sent to whatever address she'd call home next. I even deleted every picture of Ryan from my phone, our wedding day, vacations, holidays. Each deletion felt like tearing away a piece of myself, but I didn't stop. By the time the house was spotless, the sun had set, and exhaustion hit me like a wave. I sank onto the couch, staring at the empty fireplace, and for the first time since catching them, I let myself cry. I sobbed for everything I'd lost, my marriage, my sister, the life I thought I had. But as the tears flowed, a strange thing happened. The weight on my chest began to lift. Slowly, painfully, but unmistakably. Days turned into weeks, and I began piecing my life back together. I went back to work, immersing myself in projects that demanded all my focus. Friends who had once seemed distant became my lifeline, their support pulling me out of the darkness. I told them the truth, every ugly detail, and their outrage on my behalf became a balm for my wounded pride. Kate and Ryan, meanwhile, were nowhere to be found. They had left town together, their destination unknown, but whispers began to reach me through mutual acquaintances. A social media post here, a passing mention there, they were living abroad in Spain or Italy depending on who you asked. It didn't matter. I stopped checking. One evening, months after they'd left, I received a text from an unknown number. "Lila, it's Ryan. Can we talk?" I stared at the message, my heart pounding. For a brief moment I felt the old familiar pull. The part of me that wanted closure and explanation, something to make sense of the chaos he had left behind. But then I thought of everything he had done, every lie, every betrayal. He didn't deserve my time, my energy, or even my anger. I deleted the message without replying. The turning point came on a cold autumn afternoon. I was sitting in a cafe, nursing a cup of coffee, when a woman approached my table. She was older, with kind eyes and a warm smile, and she hesitated before speaking. "Lila, right?" she asked. I frowned, unsure how she knew me. "Yes. I'm Claire," she said, her smile faltering slightly. "Kate's ex-friend." The word ex hung in the air like a challenge. I nodded cautiously, gesturing for her to sit. "I don't want to intrude," she began, her voice soft but steady. "But I thought you should know. Kate and Ryan aren't doing well. They've burned through most of their savings and she's already seeing someone else." I blinked, processing her words. A part of me wanted to laugh at the irony, but another part, the part that still carried the scars of their betrayal, felt nothing but pity. "Why are you telling me this?" I asked. Claire hesitated, then leaned forward, her expression earnest. "Because I've known Kate for years, and I've seen what she does to people. She destroys them. And I wanted to make sure you're okay." I met her gaze, the bitterness I had carried for so long softening. "I'm better than okay," I said quietly. "I'm free." Months later, as the first snowfall of winter blanketed the town, I stood on my porch, watching the world transform into a white wonderland. My breath came out in soft puffs, and for the first time in a long time I felt at peace. Kate and Ryan were ghosts now, fragments of a past that no longer defined me. I didn't know where they were or what they were doing, and I didn't care. They had made their choices and I had made mine. I chose to rebuild, to find strength in my solitude, and to rediscover the person I had been before their betrayal. And as the snow fell around me, silent and serene, I realized something remarkable. I wasn't broken anymore. I was whole. And I was ready for whatever came next.